Once upon a time, in a small and lively town in Nigeria, two neighbors lived right across from each other. Their houses stood so close that their windows almost touched, and their doors were always open to one another. Each neighbor had a daughter, Adama and Akuma. From the moment they could walk, the two girls were inseparable. They spent their childhood playing in the dusty streets, running barefoot through the fields, chasing butterflies, and climbing the big mango tree in the middle of their street. They laughed until their stomachs hurt, cried on each other's shoulders, and occasionally bickered over who deserved the bigger piece of roasted corn from Auntie Nkechi's roadside stall. They did everything together. In primary school, they sat side by side, sharing books and snacks. When they moved on to junior secondary school, fate once again placed them in the same class. Their bond grew even stronger when they both got accepted into the same boarding school for girls. At school, they shared a bunk bed, a Dama on the top, a Coma on the bottom. Late at night, under the dim glow of a flashlight, they whispered secrets about boys, their dreams, and the kind of women they hoped to become. Adama was the brilliant one, always topping the class and winning awards. Akoma did well too, but never quite as well as Adama. Still, there was no jealousy between them, only pride in each other's achievements. When it was time for university, both girls passed their entrance exams and were admitted into one of Nigeria's top universities. Their families beamed with pride, and the whole town celebrated their success. After graduation, the reality of job hunting set in. Adama, with her usual grace and brilliance, landed a job at a prestigious oil company first. But she never forgot Akoma. She spoke highly of her best friend to her boss. And before long, Akoma was hired too. The two were so close that people often whispered, "Are you sure they're not blood sisters?" Every time they heard that, they would laugh and shake their heads. They shared everything: food, clothes, dreams, and secrets. But then, things started to change. One day, Adama was promoted. The company sent her abroad for 6 months for special training. Overjoyed, she hugged Akoma tightly. "When I come back, I'll bring you loads of gifts," she promised. And she did. When she returned, she brought back bags full of beautiful clothes, perfumes, and jewelry. Everyone was happy for her. Then, as if success attracted even more blessings, suitors began to appear. Handsome young men, some rich, some kind, all impressive, lined up to ask for Adama's hand in marriage. One evening, Adama was invited to a grand birthday party. She had the perfect dress but needed the right shoes to match. Akoma had a stunning pair of heels, elegant, delicate, and just the right fit. "Can I borrow your shoes?" Adama asked, holding them up with a hopeful smile. Akoma grinned. "Of course. Are we not sisters? I borrow your stuff all the time." That night at the party, Adama stole the show. She looked stunning, and everyone noticed. "Oh, look at those shoes," someone whispered. "She looks like a queen." But from that moment on, something shifted. A subtle change. A quiet, growing tension that neither of them spoke about, but both felt. Adama's illness came suddenly, like a storm she never saw coming. It began with a dull headache, then nausea, and before she knew it, she was vomiting blood. Panic set in. She was rushed to the hospital, but after countless tests and worried glances from doctors, there was no diagnosis. She returned to work, hoping to find some normalcy, but instead everything felt off. Colleagues who once greeted her with warm smiles now barely acknowledged her presence. Her boss, who had always praised her hard work, suddenly looked at her with suspicion. Then came the accusation. Unbelievable, cruel. "Adama, you've been stealing from the company," they told her. Her heart pounded. "What? Me? Steal?" She could barely get the words out. Despite her protests, the decision had already been made. She lost her job, her reputation shattered overnight. As if that weren't enough, the two men who had been seriously pursuing her, the ones who once called and texted her endlessly, suddenly vanished. They stopped answering her calls as if she no longer existed. Confused, heartbroken, and feeling utterly alone, Adama sat under the night sky, staring up at the stars. "Something is not right," she whispered to herself. But what? Days passed, and her health only worsened. The fainting spells became frequent, and terrifying nightmares plagued her sleep. Then one morning she woke up with a sharp, searing pain in her leg. Looking down, she gasped in horror. Her feet were swollen, grotesquely large, and unbearably heavy. A foul smell began to seep from them. She could no longer work. With no other option, she returned to the village, the place she once left behind in search of a better life. She spent her days sitting under the big tree near her childhood home, her tears soaking into the earth beneath her. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in soft golds and deep oranges, a kind old man happened to walk by. He paused when he saw her. "My daughter," he said gently, "do not cry. The cause of your suffering, it is someone close to you." Adama's breath caught in her throat. "Someone close to me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "But who?" The old man didn't answer directly. Instead, he prayed over her and handed her a small bundle of herbs. "Use this, and believe in your healing." Strangely, miraculously, within 7 days, her swollen legs began to heal. The foul smell faded, the pain eased, and soon she could walk again. But on the 7th day, something shocking happened. Akoma, her best friend, fell gravely ill. She could barely stand, and her own leg began to wither and darken. 3 days later, a desperate message reached Adama. "Akoma wants to see you." When she arrived, her heart pounded in her chest. Akoma lay weakly on the bed, her face pale and drawn. "What's happening, Akoma?" Adama asked, her voice trembling. Tears spilled down Akoma's cheeks. "Adama," she whispered, I I have something to tell you." Adama stepped closer, her pulse quickening. "What is it?" Akoma took a shaky breath. "I did this to you." The room seemed to spin. "What are you saying?" Akoma sobbed. "I was jealous. Jealous of everything. Your success, your job, even the way people admired you. I couldn't stand it. So, I went to a habist before your birthday party. I knew you would borrow that pair of shoes because it matched your dress. That was my chance." She broke into fresh tears. "I told him I wanted you to suffer, but I never thought it would go this far." Adama's legs felt weak. This was her best friend, the one she had trusted with her secrets, the one she had lifted up whenever she could. "I could trust you with my life." Adama's voice cracked. Akoma wept. "Please forgive me." Adama left without a word. She stayed with an old colleague that night, but sleep never came. She had endured so much pain because of Akoma's jealousy. Yet now Akoma was suffering even worse. For 3 days, Adama wrestled with herself. Should I let her suffer the consequences of her own actions? Or should I help her, even after what she did? In the end, she couldn't leave her there. No matter the betrayal, Akoma was still her sister in heart. She took her to the old man who had healed her. He gave Akoma the same medicine and warned her sternly, "If you choose evil again, it will destroy you completely." Though she recovered, it was not without loss. Her left foot had withered too much to be saved. From that day forward, she lived with the permanent reminder that jealousy, once set aflame, could burn everything in its path. As for Adama, she learned a painful lesson about trust. But despite it all, her heart remained kind. Akuma spent days in quiet reflection, the once vibrant young woman now moving with a crutch, her spirit heavy. Yet Adama still visited her every day, bringing food, water, and, sometimes, just silent companionship. One evening, Akoma finally asked, "Why do you still come here?" Adama looked at her friend, her eyes soft but knowing. Because we grew up together. You are like my sister, and sisters don't abandon each other. Akoma blinked back tears, but deep in her heart, something still lingered. A quiet bitterness, waiting. Time moved forward. Adama, strong and resilient, found a new job at an even bigger company. To everyone's surprise, her new boss was not only kind but also wealthy, a man named Uber. And as life unfolded once more, Adama remained who she had always been, someone who, no matter how many times she was hurt, chose to heal instead of hate. Adama had always carried herself with quiet grace, never seeking the spotlight, yet somehow it always found her. Uber, a man as tall as he was generous, had taken a liking to her, not just for her hard work, but for the humility that set her apart. He often invited her to prestigious events, singing her praises to anyone who would listen. Before long, the town began to buzz with whispers. Did you hear? Uber might ask for Adama's hand in marriage. Like dry leaves before a storm, the rumor spread, rustling through the streets and reaching Akoma's ears. Akoma's heart twisted with envy. She clenched her fists, her breath ragged. Why does she always get the good things? She muttered bitterly. I'm here, suffering, one leg gone, and still she rises. But this time she didn't go to a herbalist. The scars from past mistakes were still fresh. Instead, she crafted a more cunning plan. That evening, she sent a young boy to Adama's home with a note. Meet me by the old tree at sunset. I have something important to tell you about Uber. Please come alone. Adama read the message twice. Something felt off, but curiosity won over caution. She dressed simply and hurried to the mango tree as the sun dipped behind the hills. The evening air carried the scent of ripe fruit, but a strange tension filled the silence. Before she could turn back, two masked men sprang from behind the tree. Help! She screamed, but a rough hand clamped over her mouth, muffling the sound. A cloth was pressed against her face, and everything faded to black. When she awoke, she was inside an abandoned building. The walls were unfinished, the floor covered in dust. Her heart pounded as she realized the gravity of her situation. They were waiting for midnight, waiting for Akoma to come and finish what she had started. Then, as one of the masked men removed her blindfold, he gasped, Jesus! His partner turned sharply. What's wrong with you? I can't do this, he said, shaking his head. His hands trembled. What? Why? The man's voice cracked with emotion. There was a day I was stranded. I hadn't eaten all day. I was desperate after a failed job interview. I almost ran into a car out of frustration. The woman driving stopped, took me to a restaurant, bought me food, and even gave me money. She told me to call her if I ever needed someone to talk to. His partner's eyes widened in shock. Wait, you told me that story before? That was her? Yes, he whispered. If I had seen her face earlier, I would never have taken this job. The two men exchanged a long look. Then, without another word, they untied her, led her to the roadside, and handed her some money. Take this for your transport, one of them said, his voice thick with guilt. And I think you should know. It was Akoma who sent us. Adama was speechless. She wiped away the tears welling in her eyes. Please, give me your number, she said softly. I promise I won't call the police. You saved me tonight, and I won't forget that. The man hesitated, then scribbled his number on a scrap of paper. As she walked back to town, her mind swirled with emotions. The betrayal, the mercy, the sheer unpredictability of life. It was too much to process. She didn't hesitate when she reached Akoma's house. She knocked once, firmly. When Akoma opened the door and saw Adama standing there, alive, unharmed, her face turned ghostly pale. Adama, I thought... You thought what? Adama's voice was calm, almost gentle. That I would be dead by now? She took a step closer. But I'm not. You know why? Because I choose kindness. I do what is right, no matter where I go. Akoma's lips trembled. Before she could respond, a firm voice rang out behind them. Akoma! It was Obara, standing with the police. Akoma's knees buckled as they took her away. She didn't struggle. Perhaps deep down she knew this day would come. But Adama kept her word. She never pressed charges against the men who had kidnapped her. Instead, with Obara's connections, she found them proper jobs, giving them a way out of the darkness that had once consumed them. Because that was who Adama was, and nothing, not jealousy, not betrayal, not even the threat of death, could change that. After years of struggling and making the wrong choices, he finally reached his breaking point. I tried everything. I searched for a job. I begged for opportunities. But nothing came my way, he confessed, his voice shaking with emotion as he looked at Adama and Obara, the two people who had shown him unexpected kindness. That moment changed everything. Determined to leave behind their past of crime and regret, they embraced honest work. It wasn't easy, but they worked hard, determined never to return to the life of kidnapping and robbery. Months later, Adama and Obara celebrated their love with a grand wedding, surrounded by joy and laughter. Their new life was full of hope, a stark contrast to where they had once been. Akoma, however, faced a different fate. Sentenced to 10 years in prison, she never made it through her full sentence. Additional charges surfaced, and the weight of her past actions bore down on her. She fell ill, and before she could even serve 3 years, she passed away, alone and unredeemed. Meanwhile, Adama and Obara built a life filled with love, proving that change is possible for those who truly seek it. Moral lesson: jealousy is a silent poison. It doesn't just destroy others, but slowly eats away at the heart that harbors it. But redemption is always possible. True repentance and genuine forgiveness have the power to heal even the deepest wounds. Words carry weight. They can plant either curses or blessings. So choose to speak life, not death, because a heart that forgives is a heart that truly lives.